Hi, I'm Dodie Sanders with the University of Georgia Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant. This module will provide an introduction to microplastics. You'll see at the end of the presentation that we have provided additional resources for further investigations. We're going to discuss the definition of microplastics, their sources, and classification. A demonstration of visually identifying microplastics will also be provided. We're going to focus on the portion of marine debris in the oceans that make up 80% of all the material out there, and that's plastic. When we consider the marine environment and where we find plastic marine debris, plastics can be found everywhere, along coastlines, on the water surface, in the water column, on the seafloor, and in living organisms. Plastics that you may see floating on the surface of the ocean, washed up on a sandy beach, or on the sea floor, break down or degrade over varying periods of time. The rate of degradation of plastic depends upon a number of physical, chemical, and biological processes occurring at any given time. Some factors that may influence the rate of degradation include its chemical composition. What type of polymer or plastic is it? Its size. Is it the size of a golf ball or the size of a floating dock? Its molecular weight. Are there additives or compounds added to the plastic to make it stronger or more durable? Environmental conditions such as temperature, wave action, ocean currents, and exposure to sunlight. And location, for example, is it on the beach? Is it in the surf? Or is it floating at the surface of the ocean? And these factors will influence how quickly a plastic item will break down. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, plastics that are 5 millimeters in size or less are referred to as microplastics. Scientists have estimated that over 5 trillion pieces of plastic are floating in our oceans. Plastics can be grouped or categorized a number of ways, but here that you can see that they are grouped by size. This image shows a range of sizes from the larger macroplastics like plastic containers that are visible with the naked eye to the very small microplastics that require a microscope to see them. So what are the sources of microplastics and where do they come from? We can categorize their sources into 2 groups, primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources of microplastics are plastic particles manufactured or produced in a size range below that 5 millimeters. Primary sources of microparticles may be from industrial abrasives or beads used for blasting of surfaces, microbeads similar to what you see here from personal care products like exfoliants, toothpaste, and cosmetics, and 3, the pre-production plastic beads or pellets called nurdles. And nurdles are used as a raw material in plastic production. They're easy to melt, and they're used to create everyday plastic items like water bottles, bags, and containers. So how do these plastics end up in the environment? Well, the industrial beads used for blasting surfaces, like the hull of a vessel, may get lost to the environment through the atmosphere and wastewater. Microbeads used in personal care products usually enter the environment through wastewater, and nurdles may enter the environment through accidental loss during transportation or through runoff from processing plants. Unfortunately, the United States and other countries have banned the use of microbeads in personal care products, lessening their impact on the environment. When we think about secondary sources of microplastics, these are the result of physical, chemical, and biological degradation of larger macroplastics in the environment, discussed earlier. These larger macroplastics are broken down over time into smaller and smaller pieces. Water, sediment, and living organisms are sampled by scientists for the presence or absence of microplastics globally. Scientists use instruments and various methods to determine the number and composition of microplastics in their samples. There are basic introductory methods used to be able to visually identify and categorize microplastics using a microscope. The method is based on morphological characteristics, and this would include size, shape, and color of the microplastic. Size is an important factor when studying microplastics, as it will influence the range of organisms it may affect. Shape is determined using the 5 categories highlighted here, and colors can vary across a wide spectrum. Let's take a few minutes to look at some examples of visually identified microplastics based upon morphological features, shape, and color. These water samples were taken locally in the Savannah, Georgia area, and we poured the water sample onto a 0.45 filter to collect any microplastics that may be present. In an upcoming module on microplastics, I will be providing a demonstration how to collect, how to process, and how to analyze water samples for microplastics using visual identification. The sample can then be viewed using a microscope. And as you can see here, there's evidence of fibers, that blue fiber that's coming into view in the center, commonly described as filaments, microfibers, strands, or threads. We also see fragments or films. Again, this is a method that only allows us to visually identify microplastics based upon their morphology, which is their size, their shape, and color. This method is not used to identify microplastic composition or polymer type. In this image, there appears to be a piece of green film on the filter from our sample, and some films may be from the degradation of plastic bags over time. This image shows a number of fibers in the water. In an upcoming module on microplastics, I'll be providing a demonstration on how to collect and process these samples. Here are a couple resources for further investigations, along with additional brief models that will be coming up on microplastics. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you learned a little bit more about microplastics.